of you, it has been able to support internet governance forums and build capacity of different countries and in internet governance. And I believe, I'm sure many of you do have national forums, national internet governance forums, and also regional internet forums. So I would assume that for Zambia, there is a national internet governance forum, and also there is an internet governance forum at the regional level, and that will be at SADC, and also the Africa Internet Governance Forum, which took place in Malawi about a month ago in July, and that is where the UPNIC was launched and formed, hence the 2 parliamentarians we have in our vicinity today. Over the years, PRIDA supported these capacity building sessions in internet governance, and currently, beginning next year, they've developed an internet governance course with Pan-African University, and these are courses that are open. It is a course that is open to, I think, all of us as net citizens of Africa to be part of. And the first first admissions will begin next year in first half of 2023. So I think there will be, if you follow closely the Africa Internet Governance Forum, you'll be able to access this course and see what it's all about. So away from the schools, PRIDA is partnering with UNECA in hosting the Global Internet Governance Forum in Ethiopia. And yesterday we had a session, it was online. I hope there were people who are in the room who were able to attend this session. And it was looking at unpacking human rights issues and concerns in Ethiopia as we gear up to the Global Internet Global Internet Governance Forum. There were quite a number of issues that were raised. Ethiopia, there are quite a number of, human rights issues in terms of, say, internet shutdowns. It has documented a number of, violations. So there were quite a number of these issues that were coming out, and we had a chance to listen in from the chair of the Global Internet Governance Forum, Mr. Chengtai Masango, and also from the host, that is a representative from the Ministry of ICT. And some of these issues were addressed. People were given that they shouldn't be so much concerned that, given this history of these rights violations, Ethiopia is a good space for us to go to and also take this conversation around internet governance and also maybe digital rights and internet freedom. For me, this was giving us some sort of assurance that, Ethiopia is on the right path to, bringing on addressing these kind of concerns. And currently, there is a current call for volunteers to assist in the organization and management of the Global Internet Forum. A call was issued by UNECA and the Ministry of Information and Science in Ethiopia. They are currently looking for 80 youth to assist. I think the call is ongoing, so if we have young people in the room or are listening in, this is an opportunity to get involved, in understanding and, giving your effort and skills in seeing that as a continent, we are able to host a successful 17th IGF. So with that kind of background, I would like to give the mic to Honorable Nima, perhaps to share with us more knowledge about what is the UPNIC all about, what role can Parliament play in improving internet governance processes in Africa, and how can people who are at this forum be able to plug into that conversation and be able to take advantage of this initiative in terms of the number of policies that are coming up in Africa? How can we be able to contribute and be part of this initiative to ensure that it works and serves the continent in a much more evolving way? Honorable.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So, as introduced, my name is Neema Lugangira, Member of Parliament from Tanzania, but also the chairperson for the African Parliamentary Network on Internet Governance, APNIG. We're very fortunate that the African Parliamentary Network on Internet Governance was launched at the African IGF in Lilongwe, Malawi in July. So we're literally about 2 months old. And if it's a baby, we're still in the exclusive breastfeeding stage. And currently we have about 36 MP members from 26 countries. And our aim is to ensure that at least we have 1 MP per country, but also have representation from the regional parliamentary assemblies that are there, like ECOWAS, EAC, etc. EAC meaning IALA. One of the things that led to initiating the establishment of the African Parliamentary Network on Internet Governance was realizing the fact that up until now, the digital and tech sector has been developing in silo. What does that mean? It means that it has been tech amongst tech, meeting and discussing and deliberating, and even when it's civil society, it is civil society that are involved in tech, leaving aside legislators like ourselves. And the risk of that has been obviously us as legislators not being aware of all the developments that are happening on the tech side, but at the same time not having the proper clarity and understanding of the dynamics of the sector and the needs of the sector, including policy and regulatory frameworks that can create an enabling environment for this tech and digital sector to thrive. And as a result of that, us as parliamentarians are the ones who have the mandate to create the necessary laws that will legislate and govern the sector. So with this gap in understanding and gap in relations, then we, on our end, can create laws which potentially you find that maybe tech can complain about, but really they will complain about and point fingers at parliamentarians, but in actual fact, those fingers should be pointed back at yourselves, because how and when do you engage parliamentarians? So in recognition of that, we decided to put an effort to bridge this gap, to make sure that we cut through the bureaucracy, we eliminate the excuse that parliamentarians are not accessible by creating this African Parliamentary Network on Internet Governance. And our hope is that we will be able to work together to ensure that we create that enabling environment whilst adhering to the different legal requirements in the respective countries. So just very quickly, when at our launch, we highlighted key priority areas that we're going to start with. I'm sure you'll appreciate there is so much that needs to be done, and probably so much us as parliamentarians need to work on. And we cannot embark on everything at once on the onset. So we have decided that our first priority is capacity building for us as legislators. And we've identified about 11 areas that we would like to focus on being capacitated. And once we have gone through the capacity building, then we will be at a better place to decide what areas are we going to focus on. For 2023, what are going to be our priorities? What are going to be our action points? Because then we will be well informed to be able to decide that. But on the onset, and in reference to this forum that we are at here in Lusaka, I just want to quickly highlight a few things. First issue is freedom of expression. Freedom of expression is a huge topic. And it's one where globally, we're all working towards ensuring that we strengthen freedom of expression. But rarely do we ever hear the other coin of freedom of expression being discussed. So I'll briefly touch on this. Freedom of expression is where we feel that we should be free to say whatever we want to say online. But the flip side of that is a group of people tend to use their freedom of expression to make another group of people not use their own freedom of expression through hate speech, bullying, trolling, etc. Now the flip side is rarely discussed. And unfortunately, that flip side is where we parliamentarians tend to experience. Why am I saying that? Online abuse, particularly online gender-based violence on women in politics, it's horrific. None of you would want to be in my shoes. None of you would want to be in my shoes. Just to paint a picture of how bad it is, in Tanzania we have about 143 female parliamentarians. Less than 5% are online because of the flip side of this freedom of expression. So one thing that I would like to challenge the ecosystem is, much as we push and strive to strengthen freedom of expression, we must equally do the same to ensure that that freedom of expression should be enabling so that everyone can use their freedom of expression online. The detriment side of that is what? All of these discussions that we are having, your best allies are parliamentarians because we are the legislators. But if we are not online because of a few people, then how are we going to have these discussions? And there is usually a blanket excuse that parliamentarians should be able to take criticism. So the freedom of expression and the bullying and the hate speech and the vulgarness is hidden under the blanket of criticism. Meanwhile, it is not criticism. Criticism is when you criticize the agenda. But criticism is not when you shift the agenda to the gender. So that is one thing that I would like to clearly highlight. The second issue is internet shutdowns. Internet shutdowns has been a big topic during these few days, internet shutdowns during elections. And you find that CSOs and tech would try and advocate for improvements, call out internet shutdowns, etc., again, in silo. But you're forgetting that if you empower, if you capacitate legislators to understand the impacts of internet shutdowns in elections, then we can be your best allies, because even in ourselves, for our own campaigns, we need the internet. That is how we can reach the people that we're trying to get votes from. So in actual sense, we're supposed to be allies. The third thing, very quickly, obviously, is the issue of new tech. Most governments are trying to catch up with new technology. And you guys probably get aware and get access to this new tech way before us. For example, right now there's the issue of artificial intelligence. If this silo continues, it means we as parliamentarians are going to end up having stringent legislation out of fear of things that we don't understand, like artificial intelligence, the risks of artificial intelligence and things like that. So if we have a closer collaboration, then we will be able to ensure we create that enabling environment that we also desire. To conclude, I'm very, very excited that we as African parliamentarians have been able to come together to bring this network together. And our aim is to show that we don't want to be a kind of a rubber stamp network whereby stakeholders, you'll come to us and tell us, oh, you parliamentarians, do this, do that. No. We need to work together. We need to own the agenda. We're not going to be messengers. Rather, we're going to be partners. We need to own the agenda so that we can advocate as it is our agenda, but not as we have been sent to go and deliver a message. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Nima, and I think you raised interesting points on what we need to do to engage with Parliament in addressing some of these concerns. And internet freedom is part of the global, it's part of the wider internet governance ecosystem.
So just to show you how committed parliamentarians are to this topic, this is Honorable Jamba, MP from Zambia. He's a member of the network. His parliament is currently in session. So he left session to come here. My parliamentary committee is currently in field overseeing government projects, but I've asked permission to be here. Similarly, Honorable Sam George from Ghana. So we're here trying to show that we're committed to this agenda. So it's upon you guys to now use us so that we can work together.
Thank you, Honorable Nima, and most welcome, Honorable Chamba. Glad to have you here. And as already has been said, shows commitment, to the cause. So you're most welcome. As you joined us, Honorable Nima just submitted about the importance of having parliamentarians involved in these conversations and what some of the key issues, that we need to involve them more. And some of the concerns, I think, if I summarize them right, was freedom of expression is important, but again, it shouldn't be abused at the cost of others. Issues of bullying, hate speech have been raised, and for those who have been following the internet freedom conversations or digital rights conversations in Africa, we've had quite a number of, content moderation, calls for content moderation, regulation of speech online, and I'm sure some of the sessions happening are tackling some of that. We've heard about online gender-based violence. It is real, and I think as we speak now, there's a session happening tackling that. Internet shutdowns, which has become a pandemic for Africa, and where we are having the Global Internet Governance Forum, I think is one of the countries where internet shutdowns have been, it has become a thing. So apart from that, Honorable Nema mentioned the need for us to engage parliamentarians, the need for us to engage the policymakers to be able to understand these concepts so that they are able to, facilitate and assist in passing in passing, policies that are, policies that are conducive for the online environment. I'll go to you, Honorable Samuel. Are there any other issues that you see that need to be tackled? What other concerns are coming from West Africa? What have been your experiences in this space on internet governance, internet freedom, and the entire internet ecosystem? Because yes, today we are here about internet freedom, but again, internet governance is kind of, broader away from the internet freedom issues. Thank you.
All right, a very good morning to everybody, and thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you on issues of internet governance. A very good morning to my colleague members of parliament. I believe that Honorable Nima has given us a very broad picture of what parliamentarians can do and what the network, the African Parliamentary Network on Internet Governance, seeks to do. One of the key things for me is the issue of misinformation and disinformation that's currently out there. I'm sure that everyone in this room has seen some kind of information on social media or on the internet that's turned out to be targeted at them as misinformation or disinformation. On the African continent and globally, just yesterday I was engaged by a group that is looking to raise a call for action. 2024, for me, where I sit, 2024 is a critical year in my country, Ghana, because we go to a very important election. But apparently 2024 is being called the year of democracy because there are over 70 elections in 2024 alone. And if you realize what elections have become, not just in Africa but across the world, it's not become a campaign of issues and policies. It's become a campaign of artificial intelligence and misinformation and disinformation. That's basically what campaigns have become. You look at Nigeria, for example, that's going to the polls in about, 5 months' time, and you realize that the troll farms and the bots have gone into hyperdrive in Nigeria. Same thing in Ghana. I'll give you a typical example of Ghana in the last elections we had in 2020. The governing party at a point in time had 700 people who were on a payroll simply to push messaging out on social media. The opposition, which I'm part of, is accused of also creating fake websites that looked very similar to legitimate websites and put out disinformation. So, for example, you would see a website that was bbcc.com. And if you were not careful, it looked and was designed like the BBC's website. And it had international news, but it also had very damning information about Ghana, which would make the government look unpopular. Same way government also had this army of young men who were pushing out its propaganda. You would expect that this will intensify in 2024 across the world. Now, any government or any regulator that sits back and looks at the level of disinformation and misinformation that's out there, and even before I go into that, you look at COVID, and during the pandemic, the amount of disinformation and misinformation about vaccines and lockdowns and government interventions, you realize that we live in an age where technology is actually driving information. And most people in the demographic I see in this room, most people in this demographic actually get their news not from traditional news sites, but from the internet. And so when you have deliberate disinformation and misinformation that's targeted at young people and at internet users, you realize that any proper state actor is going to want to take steps to regulate that space. Now, that regulation is going to happen under the guise of internet governance, which is a broader framework. But then we need to begin to ask ourselves, as civil society and as stakeholders, what role are you going to play in ensuring that in trying to fight disinformation and misinformation, you do not have a blanket closure or over-regulation of the internet space? That's the real challenge that we need to deal with. We need to accept the fact, and yesterday I was part of a session on human rights and cyber legislation and policy making. I stuck out like a sore thumb in the room when I stood up to make my submission, which was basically wake up civil society to the role that you have to play. I risk being your unfavorite person in this room this morning with what I'm about to say, but I think that civil society has got it wrong in the approach that you're using to tackle the issues of internet governance and policy regulations and framework. The first thing that we need to come to an agreement on is that cybersecurity, which is basically government's response to internet governance, is a national security issue. Cybersecurity is national security. And there is no civil society organization anywhere in the world that's going to tell me that they're going to have a conversation with the head of the military or the head of the police to discuss how those organizations should operate or carry out their activities. In the same vein, cybersecurity chiefs are now sitting in national security meetings. In fact, they're now part of the national security architecture of every country. In fact, many countries are beginning to spend more money and devote more resources to cybersecurity preparedness and capacity than regular military capacity. And so there is no way central government, as a state actor, would look to cede policy formulation to civil society or external factors or external players outside of the government infrastructure. That's one thing we need to agree. And I'm able to say this because of the, in quotes, privileged position I've had to sit in government as a member of government. I'd served in the presidency for 4 years before going into parliament, and understanding how these things are shaped. The difference, however, between regular national security and cybersecurity is the fact that the militarized security framework is basically military in its structure. Cybersecurity is both military and civilian, because the state has to make sure that it's cyber prepared, but then the citizens who are civilian also use that space. Now, if civil society is going to become the plug to help regulate the civilian aspect of cybersecurity, then you will have an inroad with state operators. And that's the thing that I realize most civil society operators fail to realize, that in engaging with government and state institutions, state actors, there are low-hanging fruits that are easy routes in there. For example, online child protection, gender-based violence. These are issues that any state actor is going to be open to listening to. and B, become the opening for you to have a seat at the table for policy formulation regarding cybersecurity. But if you wanted to come in with the overarching design of cybersecurity architecture or policy framing, what's going to happen is you're going to hit a brick wall from state actors, because for them, they're not going to discuss that with civil society or with non-state actors. Let's put it, if I want to put it that way. And so for me, I want to believe that one of the things that civil society needs to pick out from here is that you need to redefine your engagement with state actors, using parliament as one of the key tools by engaging parliamentarians. If you engage parliamentarians on what your issues are, when these legislations come to parliament from the executive, parliamentarians are in a better position to then become the voice for civil society to push in this kinds of levers for protection. Because there are two kinds of protection. Protection for state and protection from the state. The protection from the state is what should be the primary focus of civil society. And when we talk about protection from the state, we're talking about all the safeguards that can be put in to prevent the abuse of your liberties and your rights. However, the state also has this responsibility to do protection for the state. And every state actor is going to look at the collective state security and put premium on that over the individual security. I go back to an example I gave yesterday in the opening ceremony, Ghana's cybersecurity law. If you take that law from section 1 to I think section 68 of the legislation, it basically talks about all the protections that you can give to the citizens, protection from the state. So there you have online child protection, you have protection against gender violence, you have protection for internet users, the data protection rights, protection of their data as it is used, and all the framework that can be put in place. When you take from 69 to 90, you're then looking at protection for the state. That's where the interceptory powers of the state are put in that legislation. But one thing that points out there is civil society in Ghana engaged with Parliament and said to Parliament, how do we put protections against these interceptory powers that you're giving to the state? You're giving the state powers to be able to intercept my communication and be able to listen on the basis of national security. How then do you put protections in there for me as a citizen so that government does not abuse that? So civil society engaged with Parliament, and what Parliament then did was to put in safeguards. So for example, in Ghana, you cannot get an interception warrant. The state wanted to be able to intercept communications for 48 hours before going to court to get a warrant, because they claimed that there were emergency interceptions. We said no, let's have members of the judiciary who are designated to take care of emergency interception requests. So even if it was on a Sunday at 2 a.m. in the night, you could walk to that judge's house with a request, and that judge will look at it, and if it met the threshold and the merits, the test, then they will grant you that warrant. But we didn't end there, because we know that members of the judiciary at times can become appendages of the executive. And so you would then have judges who would then be issuing warrants for political reasons. So we went ahead to say what we would then do is set up a review council, which is made up of retired Supreme Court judges that span various political dispensations. A panel of 12 that is headed by a former Chief Justice. That becomes 13 members. And what that panel does is every year they will review all the warrants that were issued by judges. So if a judge issued a warrant and that warrant did not meet the threshold, that panel will be able to flag it and then notify the citizen who was the subject of that warrant that there was a warrant and there was an interception of your communications which did not meet the threshold. And that citizen is then open to seek civil redress in court, and there are punitive measures. So you realize that all of these safeguards have been put in that legislation, which were not originally in the legislation Parliament brought, but by the engagement with civil society on how to create safeguards. We're able to take a government legislation, give government what they wanted, but give it to them within the frameworks that protect the citizens. That, for me, is the way that we should begin to have engagement between civil society and state actors. I hope that it makes sense to you, and I hope that you see the point we're trying to make here in saying that trying to redefine the parameters and of engagement, will achieve more success. Because I hear a lot of frustration in how civil society talks about how the state is not listening, the state is not giving us a seat at the table. Maybe it's because we're backing up the wrong tree. If we redefine our terms of engagement, we'll achieve more success. And Parliament remains your biggest plug to getting a seat at that table. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable George. And you've raised very interesting points. One was one of the other pandemics in Africa, and this is not just an African problem, it's the issue of misinformation and disinformation. And the question of whether we are, how do we push for, addressing this issue? And you hinted at overregulation, which may also be a problem. But again, I think that is one of the conversations that are coming up in this forum. But most importantly is the issue of redefining our engagements with policymakers who are yourselves as Parliament. And I think by the time we leave this session, I'm sure you'll be getting many buzzes in your email, especially from our sisters and brothers from Ghana on how to go about, about to go with that engagement. You also mentioned what you're doing in your country. House Parliament has been able to, work around, engage, and change certain policies. I'll go to Honorable Jamba. The fact that we're in Zambia today, and it's kind of interesting, the selection we have on this panel, because we have East Africa, we have West Africa, and you come furthest to, the southern part. So I would want to believe that there's some bit of representation. Of course, we are missing North and Central, but again, Honorable Nima, I'm sure, will convey our message to our parliamentarians from those regions. We wanted to understand, as a member of parliament in Zambia, what are those, internet governance issues that are currently happening in Zambia, and what are those processes that you can right now, as you heard from Honorable George, what are some of those processes that we can have? You can have the people from, for instance, Zambia, and of course the rest of the community here. What are those processes they can engage in advancing this internet governance debate in the region? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Some of the issues which hinder the freedoms in the internet and the regulations, wrong targets. You will notice that the civil society, depending on who is sponsoring them and what their agenda is, then you have a lot of problems with the government. You want to realize that government security in terms of internet and whatever happens have got hands-on on what the Honorable Member was saying, that you see, you can be moving as a civil society. Meanwhile, the government knows who you are, what you are, who is pushing the agenda for you. So when regulation comes to Parliament, depending on which Parliament you are, let me give an example of the Parliament here in Zambia. They will bring a cybersecurity bill or internet bill. They want to say, no, the freedoms of people should go this far, and the freedoms of the government should come this far. Now, you will find on the other side there is this non-governmental organization who is pushing that the government should not come this far. Why the government should not come this far? Someone behind is also pushing an agenda. The government should look as though it's a black animal, painted black, that whatever they want to do, they want to be getting the data of, if I was going to call my fellow politician that, okay, look here, the government is not working properly, what are we supposed to do? So someone is saying, you must make sure that this law is not enhanced because it is going to jeopardize our state. So the civil society, when they want to come out I think sometimes you want to come out with your agenda, put across the board and be clear what you're after. So that when you come to Parliament, because Parliament is going to call for submissions from across the country, can you come and put your submission? There's a cyber law here. Someone will tell you, no, before any announcement of an election is made, even if you have got it on your phone, you are not supposed to transfer it to another person to certify that, oh, I've got some information from our base and they've remitted this information. So that law, which hinders you to do that, the people don't know it. They call you to come and do the submission. All you do is sometimes, as a civil society, you and your sponsors, you come, just a small group, and come to Parliament and say, oh, members of Parliament, can you protect our interest? But you forget that this interest you're talking about, you must be encompassing the whole country. So the targets you are targeting sometimes are very wrong. You want to target a wrong fora, you come to Parliament. These parliamentarians, they've got constituencies where they're coming from. If you want a civil society, maybe you must start with the constituencies. Enhance what you're talking about. Go and tell them, like we are seated here, how many of the people maybe from in my constituency know that there's such a conference about internet freedoms? So these are some of the hiccups which we are talking about. The target group, and also to know at what point you are going to disseminate what you want to talk about. Sometimes the civil society problem they have got, they'll stand on an ant-hill. We don't want this talking, before actually robbing from the people who are supposed to. Before you know it, the government knows that you are trying to lobby for such a thing, and therefore they are going to hit a brick wall. Maybe I have said a lot for now.
Thank you, Honorable. It is more, I think it falls into what Honorable Samuel George was mentioning about redefining our engagement. Of course, when these submissions on policies, when policies are being developed, there's some countries do have a multi-stakeholder approach, consultations, what time frame do we have to canvass conversations or submissions from the communities we serve? And that is one of the biggest challenges that I've seen in Africa, that consultative process at times is short, and maybe that is why you may see some of the problems that you're highlighting. So consultations are very important within ourselves as civil society, but then also the timeliness and the precision of the matter. You cannot have everything. Usually, we've participated in these consultative processes, and you're given 1 hour to make a submission, and it is supposed to be, you probably have a booklet of, these conversations or, issues from the community. So we would like, by the time we bring them to Parliament, Parliament needs to be able to give us enough space to listen to these issues. So the timeliness in the call for these consultations, and also, how much can be taken in, is one of the other things probably that would like to see, the redefining aspect that Honorable George Samuel mentioned about. But to you, Honorable Nima, and before we engage the audience to see if there are any questions, are there any aspects you could share on what, personally, away from, APNIC, I know APNIC is an umbrella bringing together different parliamentarians, but you as a member of Parliament, are there those processes that you've been involved in or you're engaging with before and after the formation of this initiative?
Thank you. I think very quickly, first of all, what I can say to add on to what my colleague said. So far, there's been a perception of when CSOs are engaging politicians, it's attack mode. This we have to be very candid and truthful about it. The way in which civil society would approach politicians is an attack mode, and already it comes from a negative standpoint that these are just politicians. They're not going to get it, they don't understand it. So when we start from that, we already start from a wrong footing. And then second, we tend to be more reactive than proactive. Why am I saying this? You may have bills that have been tabled in Parliament, and the Parliament, through its respective avenues, would call for opinions. So what happens? You'll find civil society and activists expressing their opinions online. That is not the formal route. So they will have a big discussion and debate, but it will be online. At what point does it leave online to go to the formal setting? So that's number one. But number two, it's engagement. When we're always starting from a negative point of view, and now suddenly you realize you want to engage parliamentarians, but you don't know how to engage them. Most likely, the key ones who you now find yourself you have to engage, you have used your freedom of expression the wrong way, abused them, created stories on them. So the relationship, everything in life, just as the way it is in civil society, the way it is in private sector, you must build relations. But we must ask ourselves, do we build relations with our legislators? Or do we just assume that they are legislators, they're not going to get it? These politicians will not get it, so let them leave them aside. So this is the risk of leaving us aside. So I think it's very important to realize that this approach cannot continue because it does not work. So we need to find a different approach. And I'm hoping through such platforms, through such discussions, we're going to be able to change that narrative. And I'll quickly share an example in Tanzania. In Tanzania, I represent NGOs through our ruling party. So Tanzania, we have a reserved quota system, special seats. And every political party gets seats according to the ratio of the votes that they got during election. So I come from the ruling party, Chama cha Mapinduzi, and it has recognized certain national groups that we go through an internal political party election. So I represent NGOs in Tanzania mainland. And there has been an issue in regards to gender-based violence. CSOs are always profusely complaining that victims of gender-based violence do not get, do not get the cases worked on, do not get justice on time, and they blame police and judiciary. So as the MP representing NGOs, I asked the national NGOs on GBV and their GBV coalition, have you ever engaged the Inspector General of Police? Have you ever engaged Director of Public Prosecution? The answer was no. So you're making noise on your own, in the medias, in your meetings, but have you ever engaged these groups? So I took it upon myself to create that engagement. So I brought together CSOs and the national coalitions on GBV with the Director for Public Prosecution. In that meeting, CSOs came in with a bunch of things that they wanted to say, all of which from a negative standpoint. When the DPP started speaking and highlighting areas that he sees CSOs are not working on, for example, child exploitation, people taking children from one country to another country, claiming for work and all those kind of things. The conversation turned. Suddenly my colleagues, they didn't even open their papers, the notes that they had, because they had been hit with a different perspective. So this is the reality of assuming that this group is right, understands everything, the other group is wrong. I shared that example, and I'm sure it's probably the same, even in tech CSOs. So we need to change the perspective and how we engage. Now, coming to myself, other than championing the work at APNIG, I come from a peripheral region. And oftentimes, many engagements that I go to, they speak about connectivity, inclusion, but you find it's people in the city, in Dar es Salaam, talking about the digital inclusion and connectivity in the rural. It doesn't work. And you ask them, do you know what it means, connectivity? The region I come from is Kagera. We border Rwanda, Burundi, and Uganda. So our connectivity issues are nowhere in comparison to someone in Dar es Salaam. Because there are parts of the region, you can get MTN from Rwanda and Uganda, you don't get your own national networks. There are parts where there's no networks because there are no towers. Telecoms don't want to go there because it doesn't make business sense for them, yet we're calling for connectivity. So I started up an NGO called Omuka Hub to try and address the issue of accelerating digital inclusion in peripheral regions, not only in Tanzania, but also across Africa, to try and start up the discussion that, yes, while you're talking about all of that, the majority of the people who are already marginalized are in the rural. But alongside that, as a female parliamentarian, my personal ambition is to see more female parliamentarians online, because that's the easiest and most fastest way for us to showcase our work, to engage with the public, and to show the contribution that women parliamentarians are making in development and in society. But unfortunately, the level of online gender-based violence on women in politics is horrific. And again, unfortunately, even digital rights activists, civil society activists, when they talk about online abuse on women, they would never, ever remember that there is a group of women in politics. It's as if, because we are in politics, then we deserve all that we get. And actually they say, it comes with your job. You should have thick skin. But should that be the case? The danger of it is, one, when you have less women online, yet you're talking for bridging digital gender gap, it means you're barking on the wrong door. But secondly, there's an effort globally to increase the number of women representation in leadership positions. When young girls, young women aspiring to get into politics, when they see Honorable Nema, MP from Tanzania, chair of this network in Africa, being belittled, abused, told that you got where you are by you removing your skirt, someone speaking as if they have proof and they were in the room with you, do you think these girls would want to be into politics? Do you think these girls would want to go into leadership? Yet, you, tech, digital rights activists, would never call it off, would never come to a defense of a woman in politics. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Nima, and you raised very interesting concerns, genuine concerns, especially around gender-based violence and also around women, especially those in power. And I think this is a problem that usually arises around elections. We've seen, I think there's been some research that has been conducted on the amount of online abuse that women in politics face. And I'm happy that you're able to share the story and probably also call for us to be able to, be able to be part, understand, and be able to engage and understand these issues. But just on some of the issues, I think what I'm hearing is tactical approach when it comes to engagement is very important. You and the rest of the honorable members calling us to be more proactive than reactive, to be able to understand, the different ecosystem. And it's true, at times we get so much carried into, our issues. We want things to work that at times we forget who is making up this entire, ecosystem when it comes to mainly, not just internet freedom, but the internet governance, community. And I think I like the point that the example you gave between the judiciary and law enforcement. And I know I have some representatives in the room who may come from those constituencies. But those are very good submissions, and it goes back to what Honorable Judge said about redefining our approach with, with policymakers, with legislators. So before I open up the floor to the participants, I would like to summarize, because I think when we started, the session had AU initiatives, on internet governance, and I just wanted to summarize what the AU is doing in organizing for the global internet governance, which is due November 28th to December 2nd, and the AU through the policy, the Policy and Regulation Initiative for Digital Africa, that's PRIDA, has gone to conduct over 20 internet governance schools that have benefited 20 countries in Africa. And for those who would like to get more involved and understand the entire ecosystem of internet governance, this is where you can go. They are free courses, they are not paid for, and beginning next year, in the next quarter, in the first quarter of 2023, PRIDA, that is AUC, will be having, we'll start courses with the Pan-African University, and these are free courses. So be part of to understand the other aspect of the, of the internet governance, just not about internet freedom. Maybe that is also the other thing that we from civil society need to understand. Who are the other aspects, the other actors, away from ourselves, away from government. And usually when we say government, we look at the executive, but there's the legislature, there's law enforcement, there's, the judiciary. And also there's a current call for youth volunteers to help in the organizing of the global IGF. So I would like to open the floor in case there are any questions to our representatives. Oh God, okay. Yes, we'll start here, and there, and, oh yeah, so let's start here, and then I'll come, ladies first, so kindly make your interventions short, precise, so that we are able to, take in as many questions and responses.
Thank you. Good afternoon, good morning. Good morning, panelists. Thank you so much for your very detailed presentations, and glad to know there is an association of members of parliament that are working to address internet freedoms in Africa. My name is Vesa. I'm from Zambia. My question is to Honorable Sam George. He raised some very key issues surrounding misinformation and disinformation. I'm a journalist, not for this forum, but by profession in my other life. And so I'm keen to understand how the association is going to be working with governments to address the access to information, because this is a very key issue. You cannot speak of freedom of expression without speaking of access to information, which is very, very important. We see that in our space, in our media freedom space, we do not, some countries in Africa do not have the access to information bill. And is the association looking at engaging governments in that space to champion access to information, to get rid of disinformation and misinformation? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vesa. Let's take maybe questions at once. You can give to the gentleman there, and then we get the mic moving like this. Please keep it to 1 minute at most, so that we are able to address most of the questions.
Thank you, Lilian, and thanks a lot for the honorable speakers. So, I beg your pardon for my English speaking. My concern is how PRIDA project can involve, engage and involve many African parliamentarians in the internet governance issue, as the IGF, global IGF is coming for the next 2 months in Addis Ababa. And we know at the session, African Union used to engage and aware a parliamentarian. Are we sure that this project engage and involve or invite many parliamentarians from the region, Africa region? Because I'm coming from Central Africa, and from my own experience, more parliamentarian African, Francophone parliamentarian in Central Africa, they are not yet very, very involved in this issue. So the project, PRIDA project, makes sure that these parliamentarians are really engaged. Another concern is about the capacity building of parliamentarian. Most of the time, as civil society, we organize training, empower women parliamentarians, using technology, not face-to-face meeting, because they have also to know use such technology. Have they are dispatched along the country, it's not easy to gather them. So how are we make sure that to empower them for using the technology? Thank you.
Thank you. So you have two questions. One with working with Francophonie and then women. Please try to be precise. There are quite a number of hands and we started late, so want
Okay. If it's on.
to say your name as well.
No problem. My name is Nomshato Lubisinkosunkulu. I'm from Media Monitoring Africa in South Africa, as well as the IGF committee within South Africa. I find this conversation, I wish we had an extra hour, because a lot of elements that were spoken on, number one being online violence against women, which is not only an issue for women in power, but also those women who are holding power to account. So female journalists are facing the very same issues that leadership is also facing, whereby, for example, self-censorship has become a thing, right? And I think we need to start speaking more into what are the solutions when we're talking about, women facing online violence. Disinformation, however, I think as much as you mentioned that it's a global issue, the underlying, I think something that has not been mentioned a lot is the issue around we can speak disinformation, but reality is it's so sophisticated, it's morphing all the time. We're talking about deepfakes now. But a grandmother in the rural area would not know how to differentiate disinformation, would not know how to tell is this credible information or not, especially during elections, whereby obviously now they have to make an informed decision. So what is exactly being done when we're talking about digital literacy? We're not talking about counteracting disinformation. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, I want to emphasize, please be straight to the question so that we get more hands.
Thank you very much, and I have to say this has been a very refreshing panel. For me, my concern is, I agree with everything you say, 110%, if there's such a percentage. But the other question comes in, the citizens, the civil society, and the public generally views parliamentarians as people who are there for their own personal interests. So my name is Athena Morgan. I'm from Kenya. I represent International Center for Missing and Exploited Children. And my point is, when you talk about parliamentarians, the first thing you will hear is they want to do projects for kickbacks. Secondly, they're there for their own personal interest, how much they're going to earn, how much per diem will they get for attending training, for example. Or the lack of sympathy is mainly because there is a disconnect between your role and us citizens on the ground. So we feel you do not represent us. And I love what you're suggesting you want to do, but now my question is, how do we break this barrier of mistrust and thinking that you're not acting in our best interest so that we can feel comfortable coming to you with ideas and knowing that they will be listened to and not thrown out of the window? Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll take two more and then we'll give the mic back to honorable members. Please say your name.
Thank you very much. My name is Nisile Kaswaga. I am from Tanzania, and I'm glad to see my parliamentary is here. With me, I don't know if one minute it will be enough, but I'll try. I am not into making too many questions. I really understood everything these honorables said. And I understand their points from their, from their perspective and everything. But there are some issues that most of the parliamentaries do not address. For instance, my MP said something about things going online. People just want to go online. I tell you, in Africa, especially in my country, and I've seen in other African countries, without noise online, things don't change these days. You might find a bill is passed, for instance, in my country, you might find a bill is passed, like a person should be paying to have a YouTube channel. A YouTube channel, somebody has to pay for that. If you say you take, official channels, people don't listen to official channels. it's really difficult to reach these people and tell them, you know what, this thing is not proper. But until you find a lot of noise online and people say, okay, we should go back to this and try to make amendments. That's one thing. People have to make a lot of noise online for change to come. And parliamentaries love online. They do love online. When they do something good, they go online. I did this, I did this, I did that. But when there is criticism, when there's something different from their perspective, that's where they say, oh, no, there has to be a law. People shouldn't say this, people shouldn't say that. But whenever anything good happens to them, they love online. They love the retweets, they love the likes, they love everything when it is on their side.
Thank you.
Okay, one last point, please. We should make a way where people can reach you parliamentaries, they can reach the executive through online channels. Online channel is the best and easiest way. I come from there, I can't go to Dar es Salaam, I can't go to the city to reach whoever I want to reach. Online channels should be modified, should be made modern. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, from there and then here, and that is, please. Yeah.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Afia Do from the Youth IGF. Question, but I want to make a call to all in the room to get their voice heard on the discussion, because where a lot of stakeholders are in the panel, the discussion is more greater. Thank you.
Anything, sorry. But it's okay. We will get the last person, and then we can give the mic back to the speakers.
That's Kudzai from Global Voices. Just have a question for the Honorable Member of Parliament. My question is with regard to the conflation between state security and cyber security. So would this acceptance be tantamount to accepting that this justifies surveillance of citizens on online platforms? An acceptance that conflation between cyber security and state security, is that not an impeding of constitutional rights of people, like rights like privacy? Thank you.
Thank you. I think I'll start with Honorable Nima. I think there are quite a number of issues that may be falling directly to you.
Thank you. So I'll respond. I may not go into the right order, but I'll touch on all those that are relevant to me. So first of all, the African Parliamentary Network on Internet Governance is for bringing together MPs from all African countries. And our aim is to have at least, at the minimum, one MP per country. Obviously, we have 50 plus countries. We cannot be a network of 200, 300, 400, otherwise it's not going to be manageable. And right now, we launched on 19th July 2022. So this is literally just 2 months ago. At our launch, at our launch we had 30 MPs from 20 countries. By August of 2022, we had 36 MPs from 26 countries, so there's already an increase. And the way in which we're scouting for MP members is organically, being critical in finding MPs who are able to put in their work, the commitment, and also contribute. There was an issue here that was raised about MPs wanting to, when they're called, there are different expenses around them, but we are looking for MPs who are also willing to give meaning by their time. For example, I am here right now in Zambia. I'm not in parliament. Therefore, I'm not getting paid in my parliament because I'm not there. I'm missing the parliamentary sessions. So to get MPs who are willing to give that contribution of their time to push this agenda. Now, in terms of representation, we already have an MP from Central Africa. We have an MP from Chad. We have an MP from Cameroon, Cape Verde, Morocco, Niger, Sierra Leone, just to mention a few. So already Francophone countries are there, Central African countries are there, but it's not about just filling in numbers. It's about getting parliamentarians who can be committed to this mission. So we're open to discuss with you also if you can recommend, and we're trying to get recommendations from ecosystem, people who know their MPs, so that when we approach the parliament, we already have a name. Can we have Honorable XYZ to join our network? The issue of female journalists, we are totally aligned on that. And the only reason I did not make reference to female journalists, because this topic is for parliamentarians. And I chose to speak for a marginalized group, which at the moment, there is no intervention. I think we can agree on that. There's a lot of intervention towards ensuring that we end and we strengthen digital space for women journalists. UNESCO has such interventions, Internews has such interventions, just to mention a few. But when we talk about women in politics, that intervention is lacking. This is why, as a female parliamentarian, as a female MP, I would not do justice to my own group if I don't raise it. So just to put clarity on that. And definitely, we need to work together. Equally, in order to make the space safer for female journalists, you need legislators. So women legislators would be your best ally. But if we see that even the journalists are not thinking about us, are not remembering us, and sometimes the journalists reporting contributes towards this gender abuse that women in politics are getting. They would report on a male, they would not insert gender issues. But when it's a female, they'll say, wow, she's a beauty with brains. Oh, wow, look at how the dress, the outfit looks good on her. That attracts the abuse as well. So we need to work together to ensure that we can make the environment safe for all of us. Very, very quickly then, the other issue was about members of parliament or politicians enjoying being online and not liking it when there's criticism. If you recall, when I was making my submission, I did make reference on abuse being made under the blanket of criticism. There is no issue in criticizing the agenda. If I'm raising an issue here today and you disagree with it, disagree with the issue. But don't shift the issue into now me as a woman, me as a female parliamentarian. Then you come in with comments saying, oh, we know how you special seats MPs are found. We know how you got there. You don't even deserve to be there. That is not being criticism. That is not criticism. Criticism is criticize me on the issue that I've raised. But if you shift from the issue to the gender, it means you're using the gender as a weapon to shut me up. And that is something, that is what I'm calling out here. So let us be very clear. What is criticism? What is freedom of expression on both sides? And abuse, cyberbullying, trolling, it is not part of criticism. Now, in terms of engagement as parliamentarians, yes, we can say that parliamentarians are not accessible. But you mentioned, my colleague from Tanzania, you mentioned that you're in Mbeya. You want to get in touch with your parliamentarian. You cannot come to Dodoma where the parliament is. But come on, your parliamentarian is in Mbeya from your constituency. Can you not go to the constituency office? So there are mechanisms. But if we choose not to go with them, if we choose never to approach them, then these issues are still going to be there. But those of us that are trying to make a change, that are trying to make the environment better, you should all work with us, encourage us, rather than keep holding on to the negativity, because we also have equal negative perceptions about most of you as well, in the way in which you conduct yourselves. And having said that, as the African Parliamentary Network on Internet Governance, we welcome the opportunity to collaborate. And we are online. If you look for APNIG Africa, you'll find us on Twitter, you'll find us on Facebook, you'll find us on LinkedIn. Our website is still being formulated. As I said, we're 2 months old. But if you go to our website, apnig.africa, you'll find our communique is there. That is the communique of the things that we have committed, which was done on the launch, and all the signatures of the founding members are there. And we're going to set up, hopefully by early next year, we'll have an office, secretariat, and everything in place. So we're welcome to collaborate with all of you. But the approach needs to be on positivity and not pointing fingers, because we can equally point a lot of fingers to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Nima. Honorable George, are there some questions you'd like to respond to?
Yes, thank you very much. I'll just touch briefly on the freedom of information question. I'm sure Honorable Jambo would also see considerations or high policy considerations. Another issue that comes up is, I always say that a right to information bill or law is simply a search engine. Now, Google is effective as a search engine because Google engineers have taken the pain to index the information you're looking for. And so when you place your search, you're able to find it. Most African governments have poor archiving systems, have not classified their documentation, and so you don't even have the documents present. So even when a state institution wants to give you the document, the public records and archives department have done a shoddy job of keeping that information. They don't know where the information is. So in fighting for a right to information bill or law, we should also make sure that we look at reforming our archiving departments across Africa to ensure that the information is actually available to be accessed. But I agree with you that if we have more access to information, it will help with dealing with misinformation and disinformation. I think that there was a question about Francophone MPs in APNIG. We do have quite a number of them. There was a question about how do we use ICT literacy to deal with disinformation. Again, that's another role that APNIG is going to be playing, and that's what Honorable Nima spoke about when she said that we're not just looking to have MPs. It will be easy to have MPs from every African country on APNIG by now. But we're looking for MPs who have a passion for the job that APNIG has set out, the goals APNIG has set out to do. And I agree with you when you say that, and my sister from, I think, Kenya said they believe MPs are self-centered. I agree with you. They are self-centered MPs. Just the same way they are self-centered civil society organization people who use 60%, 80% of the funds that are given to them as administrative fees. So in every field, they're self-centered people. But in the same vein, they're people who are dedicated to doing the work that they want to do. And that's what APNIG is about. We're looking for individuals who are ready to give above and beyond what is expected of them to ensure that we have proper internet governance. And so it's, like you said, it's an organic call. Persons who have that passion get attracted to the network, and then you have people who will then champion it. All you need is one MP to begin to champion the causes in their local parliament. You don't need to have many MPs. So yes, I agree with you that if we're able to get enough MPs, we'll be able to step up literacy campaigns in our rural communities that will help people identify what is fake news, what is authentic news. Now, on the question that was asked about distinguishing between cybersecurity as I said, as a national security tool, and whether national security or cybersecurity is not now being used for state security. And I want to believe that what you also refer to is regime security, where basically governments are beginning to use cybersecurity as a tool to perpetrate regimes in government. That is a very legitimate concern, and it's a real challenge across the African continent, not just the African continent, around the world. Okay, and so you've seen it happen in Hong Kong, so it's not an African thing. You've seen it even happen in the United States, in Russia. You've seen it happen in Europe. So yes, there's always that attempt to use cybersecurity to enforce regime security. But again, when you go back to the example of Ghana cybersecurity law I gave you, when civil society works with parliamentarians, we're able to put in the safeguard mechanisms that will fight against regime security. So like the point we've tried to make here today is if we can work together and create those right synergies between civil society and parliamentarians, we're going to be able to have cybersecurity as a national security tool that will not serve as state security or regime security. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me start by my sister from Zambia talking about the freedom of information and the bills to be brought before Parliament and how maybe we can work together. Just like my colleague has said, sometimes what we are looking for, we target the wrong thing. I say that because you can have a bill of freedom, but the access to that, governments usually have got what they call state security, as he has said, of a politician, and you as a journalist, you want to get information about somebody who is of that at that level. The government security itself will want that information to go outside their circles. Now, even if you have got that bill and it is actually illustrated, they put sometimes, we don't see the exemptions in these bills. What is very much important is sometimes to see, even when the bill is passed, what are the exemptions which are there? They'll tell you, you will not enter some areas. Even when you are going to go there, they'll say that the information is not here. So we have got a problem, a very big problem, because no government is going to get a lot of its information, upload it, say, on the net so that you are going to access it. They won't. They'll say, no, this is state security. So many times when you look at this information, yes, we are going to push it across Africa and in all parliaments, but you notice that many governments don't want this information to go, and therefore they are the ones who are going to bring the bills. I can tell you, even here in this country, it will take a tall order for one, the government saying they are bringing this bill, but it has taken over 20 years. It has been sitting also here in Zambia. Why? That information, there's classified information which they don't want everyone to hear. Let me go to this, the question about the female journalists and female parliamentarians. Honorable from Tanzania, Honorable Nema. You know what? I want to give you an example. You are an example of a female parliamentarian. I don't think you are intimidated by the men, are you? This idea sometimes, let us cross over it. This idea of the females and being intimidated, just be, you see, if you see as the children grow, they only realize sometimes that this one is female as you are trying to teach them, because they will just be playing around boys and girls together. As you grow up, then they start telling you, oh, this is a boy child job, this is a male child boy, don't do this, don't this. Because human beings, as you are telling them, no, you are female, can't do this job, can you just cross over? Tell them that if you want to become a member of parliament, you are going to be a member of parliament, and if you are a journalist, you want to get the information, whether you are female or male, I'm going to get it because I'm a human being. And we as members of parliament across this network which we are trying to fight for those rights, whether for men or female, so that we move together at the same pace. Let me go to this idea of us members of parliament liking it when you say, oh, the honorable member is doing fine, the honorable member is whatever on the online. What happens is that I can tell you the best way to communicate with your member of parliament, I'm not saying that on the blogs or whatever you cannot communicate, but the easiest way to communicate with your member of parliament, make a direct call if you so wish, because you're saying they're not available. Make a direct call. Communicate with them. If you're not able, I don't know what type of a member of parliament. Me, I'm a member of parliament. I communicate with my people. I know that they cannot call me between this time and that time because I'm in parliament. But after that, I have to call back and listen to these people. But if you are going to go on a Facebook page and start talking about me and criticizing me, why don't you bring the issue so that we can debate? Why don't we remove the word criticism and bring the word debating about issues? Because when you debate on issues, you say, let us agree that to disagree on issues, instead of saying, I'm just going to criticize the MP because the MPs, you go with a negative attitude. The MPs don't want to be criticized. Yes, we may not need to be criticized. Every human being sometimes has got a way of defensive mechanisms. But what I'm saying is that in this whole ball game, if we are going to work together, let us bring the matters before this member of parliament, debate, and also agree that this is the way we are going to go, rather than this idea of posting criticisms on the pages and using internet to do the cyberbullying of the MPs. Even us, we have been attacked. Sometimes you want to feel I should stop being a member of parliament because do I deserve all this criticism or being booed around? No. Please, I ask you, let us just interact and debate at such levels. Thank you.
Thank you, honorable members, and thank you, audience, for asking those very important questions and also seeking clarification. We are coming to the end of our session. It has been quite interesting and interactive. And we've heard what the African Union is doing around the internet governance, process or internet governance ecosystem in Africa. And this is one of the products, you know, of those initiatives that the AUC is doing, on top of the internet governance support schools and the national and regional initiatives. So we'd like to thank you so much, Honorables, for giving us this space. And Honorable Judge, you wanted to say something? Oh, yes. So I'll give you, on behalf of the... You want to start? Okay.
I want to thank everyone, those who asked and those for your attentive attention to what we are talking about. We are actually putting together a strong team, the whole Africa. If your members of parliament are not part of what we are doing, please, you are also an advocate to go and encourage her. She has got the details so that every one of us can make a strong team. This internet world is the world today, and we have to live the internet. It has got no boundaries, no passport, no visa. So it's a good idea that we can be meeting like this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and I just want to say thank you for being a fantastic audience and very insightful questions. I'll leave you once again. Yesterday's session, I left you with a quote from Ghana's founding president, our founder, Kwame Nkrumah. I'll leave you with another one. My suggestion and my appeal to Africa, and this is Africa represented here, is like Kwame Nkrumah said, we look neither to the east or the west, we look forward. Let's look forward and let's continue to build the African dream. Africa 2063 is possible if we look forward. Thank you.
And for me, thank you very much for being a great audience. This is actually literally our first ever panel as African Parliamentary Network on Internet Governance, so thank you for giving us a good experience. We welcome parliamentarians to join us, and when you look at our list of members, you will recognize that we have strong-headed MPs who want to make change. For example, in Kenya, we have Honorable Millie Odhiambo. I'm sure you know her very well. And we just welcome the opportunity to collaborate and to work together and to be part of the process of things that you're trying to champion. So let's move together. Thank you.
Thank you, honorable members. As we conclude, we call upon everyone to get involved in the internet governance conversations at a parliamentary level. We've heard from the APNIC. At PRIDA, we've heard about the schools, and also we hope that everyone in this room and those online can be able to attend the second time we are hosting the Global Internet Governance Forum in Africa, and that is November 28th to December 2nd in Addis Ababa. So from me and the rest of my panelists, we like to thank you for making this session very productive and interactive. Thank you.